Coming up on New Day at Arirang. South Korea saw 301,544 new COVID-19 cases nationwide as of 9 p.m. on Sunday. Meanwhile, beginning today, positive antigen tests taken at hospitals will be recognized as official results, allowing infected people to get treated at home immediately. Tensions continue to soar in Ukraine as Russia said Sunday that it carried out an airstrike near the Polish border and killed around 180 foreign citizens who had joined Kyiv's army in its fight against Russia. And South Korea's president-elect Yoon Suk-yeol announced that Ahn Cheol-soo, the conservative politician who dropped out of the race to support Yoon's bid, would lead his presidential transition committee.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Mark Broom. Thanks for joining us for another week.
And I'm Kim Mo-gan. It's 8 a.m. in Seoul, Korea, March 14th. And over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on issues facing Korea and the world.
We certainly will. We begin with the Omicron surge, though, in South Korea. New daily COVID-19 infections in the country hit an all-time high of close to 400,000 just a couple of days ago. Now, Monday's tally isn't expected to be quite that high, but it'll still be in the 300,000 range as Omicron spreads at a blistering pace.
Despite the ongoing surge, South Korea has been steadily easing its restrictions, and several changes to its prevention scheme, including virus screening, come into force today. For more, we have our reporter Han Sung-woo here in the studio with us. Good morning, Sung-woo.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So how are things looking for today?
Well, so Mo-gyun, it's likely we'll be seeing 3 consecutive days in the 300,000 range. We'll know for sure when the official numbers come out, but that is the prediction because of the Omicron surge, perhaps between 310 and 320,000 cases, actually. Through 9 p.m. Korea time Sunday, health authorities recorded 301,544 new cases nationwide, down nearly 36,000 compared to the same time on Saturday, but 1.5 times as many compared to the same time the previous Sunday, and well more than twice the amount seen just 2 weeks ago. Health authorities predict the Omicron surge will reach its peak sometime before March 22nd, possibly even this week. Along with the rapid rise in cases comes an increase in the number of severely ill patients and fatalities. Government data reveals that the two tallies last week each saw a 1.4 and 1.5 times increase compared to the week before it. The virus-related deaths were 1,348 lives last week, 2.5 times as many as between February 20th and the 26th.
Now, Song-woo, to focus healthcare workers' time on those that need the most help in regards to recovering from COVID-19, we hear that the government is changing the way in which COVID-19 or potential COVID-19 patients are going to be screened.
That's right, Mark. To free up resources for testing, from this moment forward, starting today, rapid antigen test results conducted by medical professionals at local hospitals or clinics will be accepted for official purposes. That means the results will have the same validity as PCR tests in confirming COVID-19 infections, relieving citizens who test positive via rapid antigen tests of the need to stop by a screening center and wait long lines to get PCR tested. The decision comes as data showed almost 95% of people who tested positive through a rapid antigen test tested positive with the PCR test as well. The change will allow those over 60 to be prescribed with the oral COVID-19 treatment, Paxlovid, just with proof of a positive rapid antigen test.
Now, Sang-woo, regarding students at school, we heard that they will be able to go to class even though a family member is infected with COVID-19.
That's true. Students and teachers at school who live with someone who has COVID-19 will be able to go to school starting today. Instead of entering self-isolation, they're advised to receive PCR tests within 3 days of their family member testing positive, before taking a rapid antigen test on the 6th or 7th day. Let me also mention that also on Monday, today, health authorities will announce specific vaccine plans for children aged 5 to 11. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety last month approved the use of Pfizer's vaccine for the age group at a dosage level that's 1/3 the amount given to adults. Health officials say they're going to start with minors at high risk, such as those with weak immune systems. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency says they took into account studies confirming the vaccine's effectiveness in preventing infection and serious illness, even among young children. The development comes amid a rise in positive tests among children.
All right, Sung-woo, thank you so much for your report today. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning now to the spread of the virus outside of Korea's borders, a number of countries, including China and Germany, are witnessing another surge of COVID-19 infections.
This has prompted Chinese cities like Shenzhen to put their citizens under a strict citywide lockdown. Victor Flood has more.
China has decided to put its southern tech hub Shenzhen under a citywide lockdown, following a latest spike in new COVID-19 cases. Residents in the city of some 17.5 million people will have to undergo 3 rounds of COVID-19 testing. All businesses except those that supply food, fuel and other necessities were ordered to close or adopt a work-from-home scheme. The decision comes as Chinese health authorities confirmed a total of 66 new COVID-19 infections in Shenzhen city on Sunday. While the number of new cases detected in mainland China is relatively low compared to Hong Kong or other countries, authorities are enforcing a, quote, zero-tolerance strategy and have locked down entire cities and isolated people who have been infected. Over in Europe, Germany is grappling with a significant rise in daily COVID-19 infections. As of Sunday, the country reported over 1,500 new infections per 100,000 people, a jump from some 1,200 a week earlier. Despite the surge, the country is set to drop most of its COVID-19 restrictions from March 20th. Spain, which was the global epicenter of Omicron, is gradually transitioning to a new normality. Large-scale in-person events that had been either postponed or cancelled have reopened. This comes as the country's new case numbers dropped significantly as of February. The occupancy rate of intensive care COVID-19 beds has also declined to the 10% range. Nevertheless, Spanish health authorities warn that people should still take precautions. At a time when the COVID-19 mutant largely known as stealth Omicron is spreading, they are requiring people wear face masks in indoor settings. Victor Flood, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. South Korea's new daily COVID-19 cases remained above 350,000 for the second straight day Sunday, as the country is still being slammed by Omicron.
On Saturday, the daily tally hit a record high for South Korea of over 383,000 new infections. And on top of that, the number of critically ill patients is due to exceed 1,000 for a 7th straight day on Monday. For more on where South Korea stands in terms of COVID-19, we connect to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Midi Women's Hospital. Good morning, Dr. Tan.
Good morning.
So the prediction models were forecasting the maximum number of daily infections to top out around 350,000 by the end of March, but it's already exceeded that on Saturday. So given the exponential spread, do you expect the number of new infections to start plateauing out soon?
Well, I think we may be near the peak, but not beyond the peak. And the reason why I say that is because the test positivity actually increased yesterday from 51% to 55%. And we need to see test positivity start to go down before we can predict that we are beyond the peak and on our way down. Now, the other reason why is because of our home care policy now for the majority of patients, including more than 200,000 children. We have 1.5 million people in home care. And just the way that homes are structured, of course, in Korea, it's nearly impossible to completely isolate a potentially also with the large numbers of children at home, this almost necessitates that there will be at least one caregiving parent who is also eventually diagnosed with COVID. So we have the situation now of home care of more than 1 million people. We have, of course, the innate high population density of our society. We have the high transmissibility and the immune evasion properties of Omicron. And then, of course, we have the low stringency of our public health and social distancing measures right now. So it does look like that there is the potential that we may go even higher in terms of our daily cases this week.
Yeah, it really seems that way. The rising number of critically ill patients is also a cause for serious concern. We all know that there's a huge amount of cases right now, but considering Omicron is generally considered to be much more milder than previous strains, why do you think the number of seriously ill is rising so much? And also, do we know the makeup of those critically ill patients in Korea? Are they very elderly people, or are they a cross-section of age groups, but those with serious pre-existing medical conditions?
Yes, you're absolutely right. The vast majority of people who are in ICUs right now are age greater than 60 and have underlying medical conditions. But we should keep in mind that the absolute number of younger people in critical care has also increased as of late. And it's hard for people to understand, I think, why we have such a high number of people in ICUs now, because, as you said, at the very beginning, Omicron was touted as a relatively mild variant. But the mildness of Omicron only applies to a certain section of the population, not to everyone. And right now, the virus has taken advantage of its ability to infiltrate the high density of group residential facilities, such as long-term care facilities, skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes, convalescent hospitals, and also institutional settings for the care of people with disabilities. And it's really causing a lot of infections in that population. And for that population, the conversion to severe disease is much higher. At the beginning of the Omicron wave, the conversion was 8.3% in people aged over 60 years old. It has since gone down to 1.3%, but because the denominator has grown so high in terms of the transmission rates are being so high, that's what's leading to an increase in people in ICUs.
But Dr. Tan, even though much of the population have been vaccinated, there are still some people who couldn't and who haven't been vaccinated yet. So if you get Omicron and haven't been vaccinated, is it certain that you will have worse symptoms than someone who's fully vaccinated? And if so, what kind of symptoms could be different from those who are vaccinated?
Well, we know that for the entire population, so for everyone, overall, the conversion rate to severe disease, primarily we're talking about COVID pneumonia, is 0.06% if you've been fully vaccinated. And for fully vaccinated, I mean having gotten your third dose. However, for a person who's not been vaccinated at all, the conversion rate for severe disease goes up by 40-fold. To 2.37%. So for a person who has not been vaccinated against COVID-19, even if you're infected with Omicron, your symptoms can be quite severe, with high fever, sore throat, cough, and then the most worrisome symptom would be conversion to COVID pneumonia.
Okay, unfortunately, Dr. Tan, we are out of time, but as always, we're grateful for your knowledge and your insights, and we hope to speak to you again soon, hopefully under better circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you. Russian forces have carried out multiple airstrikes on a military training ground in western Ukraine, bringing the war closer to NATO's front line. However, despite the ongoing tensions, Russia and Ukraine will resume negotiations on Monday via video conference call. Yoon Suk-yeol with this report.
Russian attacks continued on Sunday with a spat of airstrikes on a military training ground near Lviv in western Ukraine. Officials in Ukraine report that at least 35 people have been killed and hundreds injured. Russia's defense ministry spokesperson said the airstrike had destroyed a large amount of weapons supplied by foreign nations that were being stored at the training facility, which previously hosted NATO military instructors. He claimed the strike killed up to 180 foreign mercenaries and said that Moscow will continue to eliminate foreign fighters arriving in Ukraine. The assault on the Yavoriv military compound has now brought the war closer to the Polish border, just 25 kilometers away. Moscow had earlier warned that convoys of Western arms shipments to Ukraine could be considered legitimate targets. With Russia stepping up its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, including the capital Kyiv, it's feared that more and more civilians will suffer from the fierce fighting. In the besieged port city of Mariupol, hundreds of thousands of people remain trapped without food, water, and medical supplies, and more than 2,000 residents have been killed so far, according to the city council. There are still hopes, however, that last-minute diplomacy could spare further devastation. Russia and Ukraine officials have said that talks between the two countries will resume on Monday through a video conference call. Meanwhile, the U.S. bluntly warned China to avoid helping Russia evade punishment from global sanctions. Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, is expected to travel to Rome on Monday to meet with China's top foreign policy official. The two top aides will discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine as tensions mount and worries spread that the conflict will take even darker turns. Min Suk-yeol, Arirang News.
Ukrainian police say an American journalist working in Ukraine has been shot dead in the town of Irpin, just outside the country's capital city. The police claim Brent Renaud, a journalist and filmmaker, was targeted by Russian soldiers, while photos circulating online show a press ID for Renaud issued by the New York Times. The New York Times says he was sent to Ukraine. He wasn't sent there by the newspaper. Local police added 2 other journalists were injured and taken to hospital. This is the first reported death of a foreign journalist covering the war in Ukraine.
According to the U.S. State Department Sunday, the Biden administration's special representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, spoke last week to his Chinese counterpart to discuss North Korea's recent missile launches. Kim said the U.S. and China share an interest in ensuring regional stability and called on Beijing to join Washington in publicly condemning North Korea's missile launches. He also called on China to urge the North to cease its destabilizing activity and return to dialogue. South Korea's President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol made some major announcements on Sunday about his presidential transition committee, including who will lead it. As widely expected, that'll be Ahn Cheol-soo, the conservative politician who dropped out of the race to support Yoon's bid. More appointments will be made in the coming days, and it's expected to be up and running toward the end of March. Our political correspondent Lee Kyung-eun has this report.
On Sunday, South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol announced a blueprint for his transition committee, which he said will aim to be a practical organization that gets the job done. It will be led by Ahn Cheol-soo of the People's Party, who relinquished his candidacy in the election to support Yoon, and whose party will merge with Yoon's People Power Party.
안철수 대표는 저와 국정운영 가치와 철학을 공유하고 선거 이후에도 제가 요청해서 먼저 자리를 가진 바 있습니다.
Ahn's party highlighted his appointment as a symbol of their promise to form a united government. Appointed as vice chair is lawmaker Kwon Young-se, who was chief of Yoon's election campaign. And as planning chief, former Jeju Governor Won Hee-ryung, who played a key role in Yoon's election pledges. In a position unique to Yoon's transition committee, one will be making sure that those pledges are actually carried out. Also, there will be 3 subcommittees, one for national unity, the core theme of the Yoon administration, others for COVID-19 recovery and boosting regional growth. And the Transition Committee's chair, Ahn, will take full control of the committee on COVID-19.
코로나 문제는 우리 인수위원장께서 방역과 의료 이런 분야에 이제 나름 전문가시고 또 그래서 제가 이 부분을 부탁을 드렸습니다. 네.
In addition to these, the Transition Committee will consist of 7 divisions, including foreign policy, the economy, science, and society. A total of 24 members will be appointed and they'll be announced within the week. A significant number of them could be experts as opposed to career politicians.
We will make fair appointments of members who have expertise and the ability to get things done so that people can feel their lives improve.
Altogether, there will be some 200 staff working for the committee. 이경은, Arirang News.
South Korea's presidential office says President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol was briefed over the weekend about the situations in North Korea and Ukraine by the current National Security Advisor Seo Hoon. The Blue House says Yoon was given the briefing to better enable him to deal with foreign and security issues when he takes office in May as the geopolitical situation shifts from day to day. There are concerns North Korea is ramping up work on its weapons programs amid signs it's restoring the underground tunnels at a nuclear test site, which was dismantled several years ago. The Blue House added the National Security Office will continue to work with Yoon's transition team on foreign affairs and security during the transition period.
Now it's time for Global Insight, an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs. Last week, former prosecutor Yoon Suk-yeol emerged as the winner of South Korea's bitterly contested presidential election. The 61-year-old president-elect from the Conservative People Power Party only entered politics in 2021, rising to prominence for prosecuting former President Park Geun-hye on corruption charges. Now, many experts say they expect him to take a harder line on North Korea and try to reset ties with China, which is South Korea's largest trading partner. But how can we expect Yoon's administration to approach ties with the United States? For more on this, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Dr. Bruce Bennett, a senior defense analyst at the RAND Corporation, and Professor Kim Hyun-uk at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Dr. Bennett, I'd like to start with you. So generally speaking, how do you expect Seoul's ties with Washington to change under Yoon's leadership?
I think we can expect a much closer relationship. There's a lot more confidence in the United States in the positions of President-elect Yoon. And there's a recognition in the United States that the previous policies have failed. Peaceful coexistence failed because Kim Jong-un refused to pursue it, and strategic patience has failed. We need new policies, and I think this gives President-elect Yoon a real opportunity. The Biden administration is preoccupied with a lot of other things. They would likely accept suggestions from President-elect Yoon's team.
And Professor Kim, same question to you then. Do you think the Biden administration will prefer working with soon-to-be President Yoon compared to President Moon Jae-in?
Yes, I think the U.S.-South Korea relationship has been pretty much, underestimated for many times. Under the Trump and Moon government relations, there was no 2+2 meeting, which has been an ongoing meetings between U.S. and South Korea, which is 2 secretaries of defense and foreign affairs, 4 people meeting together to talk about the alliances and 2 countries' strategic objectives. And also, I think President-elect Yoon also talked that he wants to develop the alliance into a comprehensive strategic alliance, which means that the relationship will be substantially expanded into regional and global. For now, the regional relationship has been pretty much dormant. I mean, the South Korean participation on the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy has been very much, passive. So I think in this sense, it will be much more active than before on the relationship between U.S. and South Korea.
Okay, so both of you sounding rather optimistic about how things might turn out in regards to South Korea-U.S. relations going forward. Dr. Bennett, turning back to you, do you think that the Biden administration will find Mr. Yoon's more hard-line, hawkish position towards North Korea much more palatable than President Moon Jae-in's well-documented now dovish policies toward the North?
Well, I'm not sure I would call them so much hawkish. I mean, relative to President Moon, they are a stronger set of policies. But I think the Biden administration is looking for a more realistic perspective on North Korea. The Moon administration has hoped and very much wanted to have this peaceful coexistence relationship that Kim Jong-un didn't pursue, wasn't going to pursue. And I think President Yoon has a much more realistic perspective that we need to offer North Korea both carrots and sticks. Let's try to improve the relationship, but let's also take any North Korean bad behavior and make sure that they understand that there will be penalties for that. That's the only way you deter North Korea from doing things that we very much don't want it to do.
Right, well, I think Yoon will be able to learn from some of the mistakes made by the Moon administration when he does take office. Professor Kim, another big relationship in the region is, of course, that between South Korea and Japan. The U.S., of course, would love to see much rosier relations between Seoul and Tokyo, considering they're Washington's two biggest allies in Northeast Asia. Do you think there's much hope, though, in Washington that this is something the incoming Yoon administration can do, or at least overtly show a willingness to do?
I think Yoon government will try to, bolster and revert the relationship back to normal. But I'm not sure how it will go for now, because the historical issues, for example, comfort woman issues and forced labor issues, they're very much twisted, and it's not easy to make them, back to normal. Maybe two countries can make other issues to be some common issues to cooperate with each other. For example, when you look at what Biden government have done last year, it had made an agreement with Japan and with South Korea and even with G7 members, some important issues like bolstering the global supply chains initiatives around the United States with Japan and with South Korea, and also agreed upon the importance of Taiwan Straits, prosperity and peace and stability. So I think those common issues, important issues, will be something that Seoul and Tokyo will try to bolster relationship based upon. I'm not sure about historical issues. I mean, still I think the Japanese government, even though new government came in South Korea, Japanese government will try to find something. I mean, ask the South Korean government to provide some solutions rather than trying to be more active towards South Korean government to solve the historical issues.
Yeah, it's such an extraordinarily complex situation that you find it hard to imagine much positive momentum in one direction in regards to Seoul-Tokyo ties. But I want to move on to China now, because, of course, China's influence on the global stage is rising by the day, it seems. Dr. Bennett, it's generally the case that the first overseas trip by a new South Korean president is to the United States. Do you also expect this to be the case with Yoon? And how soon after taking office do you expect him to go? And would you think that President Biden will really roll out the red carpet for then President Yoon?
Well, I've heard some rumor that there is going to be a Quad meeting in the region, perhaps in late May, that President Biden may choose to attend. And if that's the case, the trip may be to the Quad meeting to have a summit meeting between President Yoon and President Biden on the side of that meeting. So that may be the opportunity that first comes up. But I think there will be lots of effort to have the U.S. and South Korea have summit meetings early on where they share thoughts. And I am hoping that President Yoon will put together some innovative policies, because the historical policies have failed. You need new thoughts and new ideas. And I think the Biden administration is very much anxious to get those ideas and try to develop more effective policies.
Okay, and Dr. Bennett, one more time, I'd like to ask you a question before going back to Professor Kim. What do you think that President Biden is going to ask of Yoon when it comes to how South Korea should deal with China?
China's a difficult problem because so much of South Korea's trade is with China. China is very strategic. They realized that becoming the major trade partner for South Korea, that gave them real leverage on South Korea, and they have repeatedly demonstrated that they are prepared to use that leverage. I think President Biden's team understands that it is difficult for South Korea right now because of the leverage that China has. I think Biden's team will want to talk with President Yoon about adjusting the trade patterns for South Korea, but that is a very difficult and long-term approach. And in the meantime, I think the Biden administration is going to have to be patient because of the leverage that China has and the involvement that South Korea has with China.
And Professor Kim, similar question to you regarding China. Do you think that President Biden will have any success in trying to gradually move Yoon away from at least strong diplomatic relationship with Beijing? And if they do try and push for that, how do you expect Yoon to react to such a proposal?
Yes, I agree with Bruce that basically, President-elect Yoon's position will be, tilting towards the United States over China, rather than a long-time traditional, position of South Korea, which has been, trying to be balanced between U.S. and China. But the problem is how much, South Korea can be tilting towards the United States. Are we ready to be away from China on economic terms? Have we already diversified our, orientation on markets and labors away from China? Those are the things that we have not been, ready yet. So, and also China is very keen to military issues. I mean, President-elect Yoon mentioned that he will cancel out 3 no policies with China, which is all related to military issues, and China is very keen to those issues. So how much we can be away from China? We know that we are tilting towards the United States, but the important issue is how much we are able to be away from China and towards the United States. I think that's the issue. That's something we have to discuss with the United States.
And Dr. Bennett, President Biden not only has a lot of things on his plate when it comes to what's going on internationally, but also domestically. A number of issues have seen his approval ratings go on a bit of a slide in recent months. High inflation, high cost of gas at the pump, and there are a fair few analysts out there saying that there's a real chance that Democrats could not only lose the House, but also the Senate in the midterms in November, which would essentially make President Biden a lame duck for the remainder of his term. And there's a lot of talk about if he'll even try and run again anyway, considering how old he is. Do you think that's a factor in the back of Yoon's mind as well, something he will take into account?
Well, I think we have to recognize that in American politics, some presidents get the advantage of controlling their party, controlling both houses of Congress. And during such a period, they can pretty much determine U.S. policies. That probably won't be the case after the November elections. It's quite possible that the Republicans will control one or more of the houses of Congress. That means that the president needs to become more balanced in his approach. He needs to be prepared for compromises that meet the needs of both parties and the broader U.S. population. That's a difficult position to be in, but there are presidents who've handled that very well. And it will be interesting to see how Biden does. He probably will have a short period of time after the election where he's given a chance to try to be a compromising president, someone who can work with both parties and with all Americans. But I think if that doesn't work out very well, we're probably looking for a different candidate for the Democrats in 2024.
Yeah, 2024 is going to be quite the election to keep an eye on, one would imagine, considering Biden's predecessor keeps making noises about potentially running again, of course. Dr. Bennett, Senior Defense Analyst at the Rand Corporation and Professor Kim Hyun-uk at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A rising number of pet owners in South Korea are taking in their dogs to give blood to help other dogs suffering from a range of health issues. There are also dogs raised to specifically provide dogs with blood as and when they need it. A pet blood donation center, which is currently under construction in Seoul, will also be the first of its kind in Asia when it opens later this year. Our Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
More and more people in South Korea have animal companions. To keep up with the latest trend, Statistics Korea's 2020 population and housing census included data on the number of households with pets. According to the data, more than 3 million households had animal companions. That's 15% of all households. Among the 3 million households with pets, 2.4 million had dogs, while 71,000 had cats.
Starting in the 1960s, South Korea saw more people with pets, and these days the number is again surging as one-person households increase, and people readily seek attachment, not from people but from pets.
With an increasing number of households having animal companions by their side, their pets' physical, mental, and social well-being is one of their biggest interests.
Accordingly, there's also been a surge in infrastructure and facilities for pets, and especially for dogs. Korea Rural Economic Institute projected the domestic pet-related industry to be over $5 billion by 2027.
But pets also need infrastructure to support them if they are sick or injured. Like humans, dogs may need blood transfusions to save their lives.
According to British emergency pet care service Vets Now, 10 types of dog emergencies need blood transfusions to save dogs' lives. And without a culture of donating pets' blood, the supply struggles to keep up with the demand. Then where do veterinary clinics get the blood they need for operations? It might shock some animal lovers, but they get it from dogs that are raised specifically to donate blood. These donor dogs spend their whole lives giving blood until the day they die. South Korea-based animal rights group CARE reported on the poor environment these blood-donating dogs were being kept in. Dogs were packed in dirty cages and given unsanitary food and water.
Donor dogs exist in other countries too, but we are the only country where a private company cages these animals for blood.
Other countries usually have community banks run on a voluntary basis and have a widespread donation culture. This shocking disclosure, however, could not stop these dogs from being bred, as even their blood was not enough for the sick. And still, 90% of blood is coming from these dogs. To solve this problem, pet owners created the Korean Canine Blood Donor Association and began working with vets across the nation to donate blood. At first, it was just several large dogs taking part in the donation campaign. But after a while, more and more pet owners started to volunteer to donate their pet's blood, which eventually led to the official creation of a non-profit association in 2018.
We have around 15 doctors' clinics across the country that are in partnership with us. There are not only regular blood donation programs in each clinic, but also if there's an emergency request for blood, we guide our network of dogs that is willing to donate.
Wangbang, a 4-year-old golden retriever, is one of those volunteers. Before Wangbang donates blood, a pre-checkup is necessary, as the donor criteria is quite tricky. A dog needs to be between 2 and 8 years old and should weigh more than 20 kilograms. That is why only big dogs can donate. More than 40% of the blood should be red blood cells, and the hemoglobin concentration should be over 13 grams per deciliter. And the dog should, of course, have no infectious disease and have a mild temperament. To check all of these, the vet examines the dog's health and takes a blood sample.
오늘 빈혈 환자가 2이나 왔어요. 둘 다 시력이 좀 피곤한 상황이라서 건강히 혈액도 고맙게 쓰였으면 좋겠네요.
Wangbang and the pet owner need to wait for around 30 to 40 minutes before the test on the blood sample comes out. Could be tiring and troublesome, but pet owner says there is a reason why she decided to make Wangbang a life-saving hero.
This is Wangbang's third blood donation. I myself am interested in blood donation and have donated several times. After realizing that only large dogs can donate blood, we started regular donations since Wangbang became 2 years old. I found out that there are dogs bred just to give blood, so we're hoping this donation campaign can change this.
After the long wait, the test result came out.
이런 감염병도 다 음성으로 확인이 돼서 일단은 다른 아이한테 옮길 병이 전혀 없는 상태고요. 그리고 이제 혈액 검사에서도 대부분 건강하게 확인이 됐습니다. 그래서 헌혈은 충분히 가능할 것 같아요. 네.
The veterinarian says there are 2 ways to get the blood.
The most preferred way is to draw blood from the jugular vein, the thickest vein in our body. Because a thick needle can get in, it only takes 5 to 10 minutes to get the blood with almost no possibility of contamination. But as the dog must be up high on a table for this, dogs who are afraid of heights give blood using veins in their legs and arms.
In order to secure blood for transfusion, having an official pet blood bank is necessary. Hyundai Motor and Konkuk University's I'm Dogner campaign has been driving a van around the country to recruit dogs willing to donate since 2019. This January, they finally struck an MOU for an official pet blood donation center. The center, scheduled to open within this year, will be funded by Hyundai to the amount of $838,000 over the next 10 years. It will be the first official blood donation center in Asia.
There are many animal blood banks run by donation only in North America and Europe. Though there are small projects going on in Asia, it is the first time a large company is funding the launch of a blood donation center. This center will play a key role in helping animals donate blood safely and supply that blood to those in need in a timely manner.
But only having just one center in Central Seoul is not the ultimate answer for the dog blood donation culture to grow.
The ultimate goal is to have a nationwide network and have all animal medical clinics be part of blood donation. It would be nice to have the control tower, but we cannot have the dogs go to Seoul to donate their blood when they're in Busan or Jeju. We need to keep on expanding our network of partner doctors' clinics and find more dogs willing to donate.
Around 5,000 donors are needed to remove the reliance on the dogs that are only bred for their blood. If more pet owners can come forward, the day will eventually come when dogs are no longer raised in cages for their blood. 김보경, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now for a look at news from around the world, we turn to our Eastern Jay joining us from our Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
승재, a dozen ballistic missiles reportedly struck Iraq's northern Kurdish regional capital of Erbil. What's the latest?
That's right. So what we know so far is that Kurdish officials said a dozen ballistic missiles launched from outside of Iraq struck the country's northern Kurdish region capital, Erbil, on Sunday, with a U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity, saying they were launched from Iran. Now, later in the day, though, Iran did claim responsibility for the barrage of ballistic missiles, saying it was retaliation for an Israeli strike in Syria that killed 2 members of its Revolutionary Guard Corps. However, the missiles also struck areas around the U.S. consulate in Erbil. While no injuries were reported in the attack, it marks a significant escalation between the U.S. and Iran. Now, hostility between Washington and Tehran have played out in Iraq, whose government is allied with both countries. Now, Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei said he would veto a bill that seeks to increase abortion penalties to up to 25 years in prison and prohibit same-sex marriage, calling it unconstitutional and a violation of international convention. The bill was revived by the conservative Viva party after being put on hold in 2018 before being passed last Tuesday by lawmakers from different parties, including some allies of the president. Giammattei says the bill had not been backed by his administration, stressing his opposition to it. Now, the 2022 Beijing Winter Paralympics ended on Sunday with a closing ceremony at the National Stadium carrying the message of love. In closing remarks, IPC President Andrew Parsons said he hoped that the Paralympian movement would inspire world leaders to unite. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the closing ceremony in front of an audience of 30,000 and 1,000 athletes and representatives. The Paralympic flag was later lowered and handed over to the Vice Mayor of Milan and the Mayor of Cortina, the Italian cities that will co-host the 2026 Winter Games. And finally, Manchester United star footballer Cristiano Ronaldo made history on Saturday, becoming pro football's all-time leading scorer with 807 goals following his hat-trick against Tottenham Hotspur. While the all-time top goal scorer title is much contested, FIFA says Austro-Czech Joseph Bican netted 805 goals from 1931 to 1955. Ronaldo's goals have been scored for Sporting Lisbon, United, Real Madrid, Juventus, and the Portuguese national team. Now, Brazilian strikers Pelé and Romario each scored more than 1,000 goals during their careers, but the statistics include goals in amateur, unofficial, and friendly matches.
Good morning. Much awaited rain was welcomed by all of us over the weekend. The rain helped to completely put out the fire on the East Coast, which had burned for 213 hours, setting a new record for the longest burning wildfire since 2000. Also over the weekend, Seoul received about 45 millimeters of rainfall, which was 3 times more rain since the new year started in the capital. And more rain is in store today. Central regions will be seeing up to 15 millimeters. Morning temperatures are kicking off on the warmer side, but highs will not be as high as last week with a mix of clouds and rain in the forecast. Yeah, it's a cloudy but a refreshing and mild start to the day. But West Coast regions are having a rough morning commute with thick layers of fog this morning. Rain that started in the central region in the morning will spread nationwide by the afternoon and will continue through this evening. And highs will be above norms across Korea today. Frequent rain is in the forecast this week, but it's going to get chillier as the week goes on. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that's all we have for now. Mark and I will be back for another episode of New Day at Arirang at 8 a.m. Korea time on Tuesday. I'm Kim Mo-gan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Have a wonderful day, and thank you as always for tuning in. Until next time, goodbye.
Everyone knows I'm passionate. Know why? Look at how passionate Koreans are. And you know I'm fast. Don't blink. Koreans move fast too. I'm creative on the pitch. People say I'm smart. Just look how smart Korea is. I aim to be spectacular for the fans. Why